Can you read this letter before you say, I do? The flower girl's letter brought the groom to tears. Hi viewers, welcome back to Storytime with Mr. Taylor. Before we begin today's story, I want you to know something. Every single one of you watching has faced a moment where truth and love collided. Maybe you're facing it right now. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever kept a secret from someone you love because the truth might destroy everything? I'm praying for each of you today that you find the courage to choose honesty even when it costs you everything. Because today's story will show you why truth, even painful truth, builds stronger foundations than any lie ever could. Welcome to our family here, where real stories meet real hearts. The 8-year-old flower girl pressed a crumpled envelope into the groom's trembling hands 20 minutes before, I do. Inside, childish handwriting revealed words that could destroy everything. Uncle Lucas, Aunt Danielle cried all night. She said you won't love her anymore if you find out what she did. The bride had secretly destroyed his $1 million development deal. Not from malice, but to save dying children in her clinic. Would you walk down the aisle if you discovered your bride had been hiding something that cost you everything? Have you ever loved someone so much you'd rather lose them than disappoint them? Ever kept a secret that ate you alive because telling the truth felt like choosing between your conscience and your heart? Drop a heart in the comments if you've been there. This is what happens when doing the right thing means betraying the person you love most. Would Lucas choose his empire or his bride? The answer lies in what happened next. Follow this story of impossible choices and discover what real love demands when truth meets pride. Let me take you back 6 months, to the moment two strangers collided in a hospital corridor. Lucas Hartman had closed $1 million deals without breaking a sweat, but one look from the pediatric nurse covered in paint and glitter left him speechless. He wasn't supposed to be there. The hospital PR visit was just another tax write-off. Another photo opportunity to make his development company look community-minded. But when he turned that corner into the children's ward, everything changed. The pediatric ward hummed with controlled chaos, monitors beeping, children laughing, and there she stood in scrubs, splattered with finger paint, holding a crying toddler like the child was made of spun glass. You lost? Her voice cut through the noise, sharp but not unkind. Danielle Brooks didn't recognize him. Didn't know he owned half the commercial property in the city. To her, he was just another suit in the wrong place. I'm here for the donor tour, Lucas managed, suddenly aware of how out of place his $1,000 shoes looked on the scuffed hospital floor. She shifted the child to her other hip, leaving a small handprint of blue paint on her shoulder. Donors, right. Well, maybe you can donate some clean water while you're at it. Half these kids are here because of contamination from that new development upstream. The accusation hit him in the chest. His development. That's a serious claim, he said carefully, stepping closer to help when she fumbled with the child's IV line. Their hands touched for just a second, her fingers warm, slightly sticky with paint, sending an unexpected jolt through him. He noticed her pulse jumping at her throat when he didn't immediately pull away. It's not a claim, it's fact. I've got the medical files to prove it. She pulled back, those brown eyes challenging him. But men like you don't care about facts unless they affect your bottom line. Men like him. If only she knew. Maybe I'm not who you think I am, Lucas said quietly. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sure, you're different, that's what they all say. When was the last time someone saw through your facade in seconds? Drop a comment about that person who changed your perspective instantly. As he left the hospital, Lucas couldn't shake the image of those sick children, or the way Danielle's eyes had hardened when she mentioned the new development upstream. He had no idea she was talking about his project, but he was about to find out. She showed up at his office unannounced, medical files in hand, ready for war, not knowing she was about to fall for the enemy. 3 days after their hospital encounter, Danielle stood in the marble lobby of Hartman Industries, clutching a folder thick with test results and medical records. She'd tracked down the parent company behind the development. What she hadn't expected was to find the man from the hospital sitting behind the CEO's desk. "You," she breathed, freezing in his doorway. "Me," Lucas confirmed, standing slowly. "Please, come in." His corner office overlooked the city like a king surveying his kingdom. But she stood there unfazed, medical charts spread across his mahogany desk like battle plans. You knew who I was talking about at the hospital, and you said nothing. I wanted to hear what you had to say without the title getting in the way." He moved around the desk, stopping just close enough to see the anger flickering in her eyes. "Show me the files." For the next hour, she laid out her case. 15 children with similar symptoms. Water tests showing industrial runoff. Timeline matching his construction schedule. As she talked, Lucas found himself watching her hands, how they moved with precision, how she touched each file like it held something precious. He loosened his tie while reviewing her data, trying to focus on the numbers instead of how the afternoon light caught the gold flecks in her eyes. She noticed the way his shoulders filled his shirt when he leaned over the desk, the way his jaw tightened reading each medical report. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "This is my fault." "Yes," she said simply. "It is." Their fingers brushed as they reached for the same chart. This time, neither pulled away immediately. Her breath caught when he leaned close to examine the data, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive but not overwhelming. "I'll fix this," he said quietly. "Whatever it takes." "Why should I believe you?" "Because," Lucas met her eyes, "I'm not who you think I am either." "Ever fallen for someone you should have been fighting against?" "Tell me about that unexpected attraction below." He promised to look into it personally, and she left believing she'd found an ally. Neither knew that by hiding his identity, Lucas had just lit a fuse that would explode everything they were about to build. The truth always finds its way out. Always. Every kiss tasted like betrayal he hadn't confessed to yet, but her secrets ran just as deep. 2 weeks later, they sat in a dim jazz club on the wrong side of town. Her choice, not his. Lucas had asked her to dinner to discuss the water contamination fixes. At least, that's what they both pretended this was about. The jazz club's amber lights painted shadows across her face as she laughed, unaware that every moment of joy was building toward inevitable devastation. "You don't seem like the jazz type," Danielle said, watching him actually relax for the first time since she'd met him. "My dad was a saxophone player, before he got sick." The admission surprised them both. Lucas didn't talk about his father. He used to say music was the only honest conversation left in the world. What happened to him? Cancer, from the factory he worked in. No one could prove it, of course. His fingers tightened around his whiskey glass. That's why your files hit me so hard." She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "You're really going to fix it?" "Already started. Shut down construction yesterday. Water filtration system goes in next week." What he didn't tell her was that it would cost him $3 million. What she didn't tell him was that her best friend had already identified him as the developer poisoning kids. "Stay away from him," her friend had warned. "Lucas Hartman destroys everything he touches." But sitting there, watching him tap his fingers to the music's rhythm, seeing the vulnerability crack through his polished surface, Danielle made a choice that would haunt her. Outside her apartment later, the moment hung between them like a held breath. His hands found her hair, gentle but certain. Her back pressed against the door as he stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat. "Stay," she whispered against his mouth, the word escaping before she could stop it. He pulled back, forehead resting against hers. "If I stay tonight, I'll never want to leave." "Then don't." But he did leave, because he knew he was lying to her. And somewhere across town, Danielle's laptop sat open on her kitchen counter. The draft of a complaint to the City Planning Commission glowing on the screen, about his development. Is a relationship built on hidden truths doomed from the start? Or can love survive anything? Share your thoughts. That night, while Lucas held her sleeping form, Danielle's laptop screen glowed with the draft of a complaint to the City Planning Commission about his development. Both were keeping secrets that would detonate their world. She found the contracts in his study, his name on every document destroying her kid's health, while wearing his engagement ring. 3 months had passed. 3 months of falling deeper, of Lucas fixing the water problem, of Danielle believing she'd misjudged him. The 2-carat diamond on her finger caught the morning light as she searched his home office for a pen. That's when she saw them. The contracts lay spread across his desk like evidence of a crime, his signature bold and unmistakable on papers that might as well have been death sentences for her patients. Not just the current development, 3 others, all with the same violations, all with the same cost-cutting measures that put profit over safety. The dates went back 2 years, long before he'd met her, long before he'd promised to change. Her hands shook as she read each one. The engagement ring, the one he'd slipped on her finger just last week while promising to love her forever, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She thought about that morning, how he'd kissed her awake, how his hands had mapped every inch of her skin like he was memorizing her. Now those same hands had signed documents that poisoned children. The worst part? The newest contract was dated last week, the day after he proposed. Danielle sank into his leather chair, medical training taking over as her heart shattered. She photographed every document, every violation, every signature. The evidence was undeniable. She had 2 choices: confront him and watch him cover it up, or protect the children who couldn't protect themselves. At 3 a.m., while Lucas slept peacefully in their bed, she submitted the complaint to the City Planning Commission. She used her medical credentials, included all the evidence, but kept her name hidden. The next morning, Lucas kissed her goodbye, talking about wedding venues and honeymoon plans. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I love you too," she whispered back, knowing she'd just destroyed everything he'd built. What would you choose? Protecting innocent children or protecting the person you love? There's no right answer. Tell me yours. She submitted the complaint at 3 a.m., using her medical credentials but hiding her name. The next morning, Lucas kissed her goodbye, not knowing she'd just destroyed everything he'd built. The call came during their engagement party. The city had shut down his entire development, and someone with medical expertise had exposed him. 200 guests filled the ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton. Champagne flowed, laughter echoed, and Danielle wore a smile that felt like broken glass in her mouth. Lucas stood at the microphone, raising his glass. "To my future wife, who showed me that success means nothing without someone to share." His phone buzzed. Then again. Then it wouldn't stop. The champagne toast died on everyone's lips as Lucas's phone rang, his face draining of color while 200 guests watched his empire crumble in real time. "What do you mean, shut down?" His voice carried across the suddenly silent room. "All 4 projects?" Danielle's stomach turned to ice. All 4. They'd found all 4. His business partner, Richard, grabbed the phone. The conversation that followed was brutal, public, and devastating. Someone with medical knowledge had filed a complaint. Someone who knew exactly where to look, what to document, how to present evidence that couldn't be disputed. "Find out who did this," Lucas said, his voice deadly quiet. The champagne glass shattered in his grip, blood mixing with champagne as it dripped onto the white tablecloth. That night, in their apartment, Danielle cleaned his cut hand while he sat in shocked silence. His empire, 10 years of building, gone in a single day. "Hey," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "We'll get through this." He pulled her onto his lap, burying his face in her neck. "I don't care about the money, but someone I trusted did this. Someone who knew exactly where to look." She held him tighter, feeling his body shake with rage and loss. That night, he made love to her like she was his only anchor in a storm. He clung to her, whispered how she was all that mattered, how everything else could burn as long as he had her. And Danielle lay there afterward, his arms around her, knowing she was the earthquake that had destroyed him. Could you make love to someone knowing you'd destroyed their dreams? Where's the line between love and honesty? As Lucas fell asleep in her arms, Danielle made a decision. She'd marry him and spend her life making it right, even if it meant living with the guilt forever. 8-year-old Lila heard everything through the bedroom door, her aunt crying about lies and a wedding built on secrets. 1 week before the wedding, Lila sat in the hallway of her aunt's apartment, coloring a picture of a bride and groom. She'd been waiting for Aunt Danielle to finish talking to her mom so they could go get ice cream. But the conversation had gone on forever, and now there was crying. Through the crack under the door, Lila could see her aunt's shadow pacing, could hear words like "destroyed him" and "can't tell him now" floating like ghosts in the hallway. "I ruined his life, Claire. I destroyed everything he worked for. You saved those children," her sister's voice came back, firm but gentle. "But I'm marrying him in 7 days. I'm walking down that aisle knowing I'm the reason he lost everything. What kind of person does that make me?" Lila pressed her ear closer to the door. Uncle Lucas had lost something? But he always seemed so happy when he visited. He brought her presents, taught her card tricks, and looked at Aunt Danielle like she was made of stars. "You did the right thing," Claire said. "Those kids would have died. I know that. But Lucas doesn't. He thinks someone betrayed him. He spent weeks trying to find out who filed that complaint, and every single night he holds me and tells me I'm the only good thing left in his life." The crying got worse. Lila had never heard her aunt sound so broken. "Last night, we were together, and he whispered 'forever' against my skin like a promise. How can I promise him forever when our whole foundation is built on a lie I told?" Danielle's voice cracked, remembering how Lucas had touched her just hours ago, how he'd mapped her body with reverent hands, not knowing those same hands had signed the papers that poisoned children. The guilt mixed with desire in a way that made her feel sick and alive at the same time. Do children sometimes see truths more clearly than adults? When has a child's honesty changed your perspective? Lila spent all night writing the letter, her crayon pressing hard enough to tear the paper in places. She had to save them both, even if she didn't understand how. The vineyard looked like heaven, but Lucas felt hell building in his chest as he read a child's plea to save his marriage before it began. 20 minutes. That's all the time left before he'd stand at that altar and promise his life to Danielle. The morning sun painted the North Carolina mountains gold. 200 guests were taking their seats, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Uncle Lucas?" Lila stood in the doorway of his dressing room, her flower girl dress pristine white, her small hands holding an envelope. "Can you read this before you say 'I do'?" His best man, Troy, laughed. "That's adorable. She probably drew you a picture." But something in Lila's eyes, fear mixed with determination, made Lucas's stomach drop. He took the envelope, noticed how she'd pressed so hard with the crayon that she'd torn through in places. 200 guests sat in white chairs among the vines, waiting for a union that might never happen, while the groom stood frozen in his dressing room, a child's letter shaking in his hands. The words were simple, childish, but they detonated like bombs. "Uncle Lucas, please don't be sad, but I heard Aunt Danielle crying last night. She said you might not love her if you find out what she did. She said she destroyed you. Please talk to her before you say yes. I don't want you both to cry like Mommy and Daddy did before they stopped loving each other." The room tilted. Lucas gripped the edge of the dresser, his reflection in the mirror showing a man whose world had just cracked down the middle. Last night. God. Last night Danielle had been so passionate, so desperate in her need for him. She'd traced his face in the dark like she was memorizing him, whispered promises against his mouth that now felt like goodbye. Her hands had shaken when she undressed him. He'd thought it was wedding nerves. Now those moments felt like lies. Everything felt like a lie. "Lucas," Troy stepped forward. "You okay, man? Would you confront someone minutes before marrying them? Or would you wait? What would you do with Lila's letter?" Lucas walked toward Danielle's dressing room, each step heavier than the last, knowing the next 5 minutes would either destroy them or forge something unbreakable. She stood in her wedding dress like an angel about to fall, tears already streaming before he even spoke. Lucas didn't knock. He pushed open the door to find Danielle alone, her mother having just stepped out. She turned, smiled bright until she saw his face. Then she knew. "You know," she whispered, "Lila gave me a letter." His voice was deadly calm, the kind of quiet that comes before destruction. "Tell me what you did." Her wedding dress pooled around her as she sank to the floor, looking up at him with eyes that held both defiance and devastation. A warrior who'd won the battle but lost the war. I filed the complaint. I'm the one who destroyed your developments. The words hung between them like a blade. Lucas felt his chest cave in, felt every moment of the last 6 months rearranging itself into a different story. The woman he loved, the woman he'd rebuilt his life around, had been the one to tear it down. You knew. This whole time you knew what you'd done to me. I found out after we were already together. After I already loved you. Tears ran down her face, ruining the makeup that had taken 2 hours to perfect. I went to your office looking for a pen and found the contracts. All of them. Not just the one development, Lucas. 4 of them. 4 communities you were poisoning. So you decided to destroy me? I decided to save children. She stood, the dress rustling like thunder. 15 kids in my ward, Lucas. 15 children dying because you cut corners to save money. The space between them crackled with history. Every kiss, every touch, every promise now poisoned by truth. He wanted to rage at her, wanted to pull her close, wanted to rewind time to before he knew. Her chest rose and fell under the corseted dress, and he hated that he still wanted her, still loved her, even now. Can love survive when someone chooses moral righteousness over loyalty to you? Is that betrayal, or the highest form of love? Lucas knelt beside her, lifting her chin with one finger. You chose those kids over me. Her response would determine if they'd walk down that aisle or walk away forever. He could hear the wedding march beginning, feel 200 eyes waiting, while the woman he loved sat broken on the floor between them. Yes, Danielle said simply. I chose those kids over you. And I would do it again. The honesty of it hit Lucas like cold water. No excuses, no justifications, just truth. But I also chose you, she continued, voice stronger now. Every day since then, I've chosen you. I could have walked away when I found out who you really were. Could have disappeared, let you think the whistleblower was some random activist. Instead, I stayed. I stayed knowing that loving you meant living with this guilt forever. Why? Because I saw who you could be. You fixed the water problem immediately when I brought it up. You cared, Lucas. You just didn't know how much damage you'd already done. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting them in gold, while outside, confused murmurs rose from guests wondering why the ceremony hadn't begun. Lucas pulled her to her feet, their bodies close enough that he could feel her trembling. Her breath warmed his neck, the familiar scent of her perfume making his chest ache. His hands knew every curve of her body, had worshipped every inch of her, and now they hesitated between pulling her close and pushing her away. You destroyed everything I built. No, I destroyed everything that was poisoning people. There's a difference. The door cracked open. Lila peeked in, eyes wide with fear. Did I do something bad? Lucas looked at the child who'd had more courage than either adult in the room. Then he looked at Danielle. Really looked at her. Not the beautiful bride, but the woman who'd chosen conscience over comfort, who'd risked everything to save children she didn't even know. His father had died from corporate negligence. Died because someone chose profit over safety. And here he'd become the very thing that had killed his father. No, sweetheart, Lucas said to Lila. You did something brave. What matters more? Someone who protects your interests, or someone who protects your soul? Comment your choice below. Lucas took her hand, then Lila's, and walked toward the door. We're getting married, he said, but first, everyone needs to hear the truth about what love really costs. Lucas stood at the altar and read a child's letter aloud to 200 guests, then told them why his bride was the bravest woman he'd ever known. The vineyard fell silent except for wind through leaves as Lucas held up Lila's crumpled letter, his voice carrying across rows of stunned faces. This 8-year-old had more courage than any adult here, he began. She knew something was wrong and she spoke up, just like Danielle did 6 months ago. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Danielle stood beside him, chin high despite the tears on her face. My bride discovered I was poisoning children through my developments. She had two choices: protect the man she loved or protect innocent kids. She chose the kids. She filed the complaint that destroyed my company. The silence was deafening. Lucas's business partners sat rigid in their seats, fury building on their faces. And today, I'm choosing her. Because she showed me that success built on suffering isn't success at all. She loved me enough to stop me from becoming a monster, even though it meant risking everything we had. He turned to Danielle, taking both her hands. You didn't betray me. You saved me. You saved me from becoming someone my father would have despised. The way she looked at him then, like he'd just given her the world, made his chest expand. He pulled her close, not caring about protocol or propriety. This was their truth, messy and complicated and real. So yes, we're getting married, but not as the people we pretended to be. We're getting married as the people we actually are, flawed, honest, and choosing each other anyway. Richard, his former business partner, stood abruptly. The man who'd built an empire alongside Lucas, who'd been there from the beginning, looked at them with disgust. This is insane, Lucas. She destroyed you and you're thanking her? She destroyed what needed to be destroyed. Would you want your partner to publicly defend your mistakes, or would that humiliate you more? Share below. As he finished speaking, Lucas's former business partner stood up from the crowd. If you marry her, you're done in this industry. The ultimatum hung in the air like a blade. Sometimes choosing love means losing everything else, and Lucas was about to prove he understood that math. Richard's words echoed across the vineyard like a death sentence. If you marry her, you're done in this industry. The business partner stood like a monument to everything Lucas used to value: money, power, reputation, while beside him stood Danielle, representing everything he'd learned to treasure. You're really going to throw away 10 years of building an empire for a woman who betrayed you? Richard's voice carried to every guest. She cost you $50 million, Lucas. $50 million. Lucas felt Danielle tense beside him, saw her start to pull away. He caught her hand, pulled her against him possessively, making his choice with his body before his words. The crowd held its breath. You're right, Richard. She cost me $50 million. Lucas's voice was steady, clear. But those $50 million were built on poisoning kids. My father died from corporate negligence. From men like us who thought profit mattered more than people. Danielle didn't betray me. She saved me from becoming the monster that killed my father. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some guests started standing, not to leave, but to see better. You want to blacklist me? Go ahead. But know this, we're taking every penny I have left and building a clinic where my development stood. A place where kids get treatment regardless of their parents' bank accounts. You're insane, Richard spat. No. I was insane when I thought success meant stepping on others to climb higher. Danielle taught me that real success is lifting others as you rise. Lucas turned to face Danielle fully, his hands framing her face. You didn't destroy my empire. You destroyed my ignorance. And I choose you over any amount of money, any business deal, any partnership that requires me to hurt innocent people. The kiss that followed wasn't gentle. It was claiming, declaring, choosing. When they broke apart, half the crowd was applauding while Richard stormed off with a handful of business associates. Have you ever had to choose between success and happiness? What did you pick and why? Lucas's response shocked everyone. Then I'm done. But first, let me tell you about the new clinic we're building where that development used to stand. They wrote new vows right there, in front of everyone, because the old ones didn't fit who they'd become in the last hour. Lucas looked at the prepared cards in his pocket, then tossed them aside. Those were written by a man who didn't know what love really meant. The afternoon sun painted everything golden as they stood facing each other. No longer perfect, but finally real, speaking words that tasted like freedom after months of swallowing lies. Danielle, Lucas began, his voice rough with emotion. I promise to love you not in spite of your courage to challenge me, but because of it. I promise to choose right over easy, truth over comfort, and your conscience over my pride. I promise to build something with you that matters more than money ever could." Danielle's hands shook as she held his, tears streaming freely now. "Lucas, I promise to never let you become less than the man your father would be proud of. I promise to stand beside you as we rebuild. Not your empire, but something that heals instead of hurts. I promise to love you with the same fierce honesty that brought us here, even when that honesty is hard." Little Lila stepped forward with the rings, beaming. The crowd had swelled as resort guests, drawn by the drama, joined the edges of the ceremony. "Wait," Lucas said, kneeling to Lila's level. "This brave little girl saved us both. Lila, you taught us that love means speaking truth even when you're scared. You're the real hero today." He lifted her up, and she threw her arms around both of them. The photographer captured the moment, not the polished perfection they'd planned, but something raw and real and beautiful. When Lucas slipped the ring on Danielle's finger, his touch lingered, thumb brushing her pulse point. When she returned the gesture, her fingers traced the lines of his palm, like writing a promise on his skin. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said, voice thick with emotion. "Kiss your bride." The kiss was hungry, desperate, finally honest. Two people who'd been drowning in secrets finally coming up for air. Could you marry someone who cost you everything material but gave you everything real? Tell me below. As they kissed, Danielle whispered something only Lucas could hear, a secret that would change their first night as husband and wife. She stood in their honeymoon suite wearing white lace and truth. Finally, nothing between them but skin and promises. The suite overlooked mountains painted purple by twilight, but Lucas only saw her, standing backlit by the window, finally his without secrets casting shadows. "There's something else," Danielle said softly, hands resting on her stomach. "I'm pregnant." Lucas froze, the champagne glass halfway to his lips. "What?" 8 weeks. I found out the morning I discovered your contracts. The same day I filed the complaint." Her voice broke. "I destroyed your empire while carrying your child." The glass fell from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. In 2 strides he was across the room, dropping to his knees in front of her, hands gentle on her stomach. "Our baby? Our baby. You were pregnant, and you still chose to—" His voice cracked with emotion. "I couldn't bring a child into a world where their father profited from poisoning other children. I needed you to be someone our baby could be proud of." Lucas stood slowly, his hands sliding up to frame her face. "You gave up everything to give our child a father worth having." "We both gave up everything," she corrected. "And look what we gained." He undressed her slowly, like unwrapping something sacred after months of hidden truths. Each piece of lace that fell away was another wall coming down. When his lips found her skin, she gasped. Not from surprise, but from the intensity of finally being completely known. "I love you," he whispered against her throat. Her shoulder, the gentle swell where their child grew. "All of you. Every choice, every sacrifice, every truth you told when lying would have been easier." She pulled him up, her hands mapping the planes of his chest, relearning him without deception between them. When they came together, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, honest, 2 people claiming each other completely for the first time. "Promise me," she gasped as they moved together. "No more secrets." "Never," he vowed, sealing it with a kiss that swallowed her cry of release. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets and moonlight, Lucas's hand rested protectively over where their child grew. "We're going to build something beautiful from these ashes. Together," she agreed, already drifting towards sleep. "Is intimacy deeper when all secrets are gone? When you've seen someone's worst and chosen their best?" Share your thoughts. 3 months later, the clinic opened where Lucas's development once stood, but the morning of the opening, an unexpected visitor would change everything again. The man who'd threatened to destroy Lucas stood at the clinic door with a check for $10 million and tears in his eyes. Richard looked older, smaller, holding the hand of a pale 6-year-old boy with tubes running from his nose. "This is my grandson, Tyler. He has leukemia. Every hospital said 6-month wait for treatment. Except yours." The clinic's walls were covered with children's handprints in paint, each one representing a life saved because Danielle chose conscience over comfort. Lucas stood frozen in the doorway. Beside him, Danielle shifted their newborn daughter in her arms, her free hand finding his. "I'm not here for forgiveness," Richard continued, his voice breaking. "I'm here because you built something that saves lives instead of taking them. And my grandson needs saving." "Everyone is welcome here," Danielle said simply. "That's the point." Over the next 3 hours, Richard watched as Lucas and Danielle treated Tyler like he was their own. No special treatment because of who his grandfather was, or wasn't. Just compassion, competence, and care. "The check," Richard said finally, pulling it from his pocket. "It's not charity, it's investment. In something that matters." Lucas looked at the amount, enough to expand the clinic to 3 more locations. "Why?" "Because I spent 40 years building an empire. You spent 1 year building a legacy. And when Tyler asked me what I'd built, I had nothing to show him but empty buildings and bank statements. You can show your daughter lives saved." That afternoon, a photographer from the local paper captured Lucas and Danielle working side by side, him holding their daughter while reviewing patient charts, her examining Tyler while 7 months pregnant with their second child. Their wedding rings caught the light as their hands met over a medical file, fingers intertwining briefly before returning to work. Lila, now 13, volunteered in the children's ward every weekend. She'd started a program where kids wrote letters to other sick children, spreading hope the way she'd once spread truth. "Remember when you thought I'd destroyed everything?" Danielle asked that night, her head on Lucas's shoulder as they watched their daughter sleep. "You did destroy everything," he said, kissing her temple. "Everything that needed destroying. And from those ashes, we built something worth having. Do you believe good choices eventually reward themselves? Has doing the right thing ever cost you before paying off?" 5 years later, Lila would write another letter, this time to their daughter, explaining how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth when everyone wants you to be quiet. Their daughter found the letter on her 13th birthday, Lila's gift explaining how her parents' love story really began. The original letter, now framed in their bedroom, caught morning light as their daughter read Lila's new words, understanding finally why her parents always said love wasn't about perfection, but truth. "Dear Emma," the letter began, 13 years ago, I saved your parents' marriage with a crayon and courage. Now I want to tell you why." Emma sat on her parents' bed, the morning sun streaming through windows that overlooked not a business empire but a thriving community health center that bore her grandmother's name. The woman Danielle had saved with Lucas's help all those years ago. "Your mom chose children's lives over your dad's money. Your dad chose truth over pride. They chose each other over everything else. But most importantly, they chose to build something that would outlast them both." Lucas and Danielle stood in the doorway, watching their daughter read. At 45 and 42, they wore their years like badges of honor, laugh lines from joy, gray streaks from struggle, hands that fit together like puzzle pieces worn smooth. "Is this true?" Emma asked, looking up with eyes that matched her father's. "Mom really destroyed Dad's company?" "Every word," Lucas confirmed, pulling Danielle closer. "And I thank God every day she did." That night was their 15th anniversary. After the kids were asleep, Emma, 12-year-old Marcus, and 8-year-old Grace, Lucas and Danielle retreated to their bedroom. The passion between them hadn't dimmed. If anything, it had deepened. He still looked at her like she hung the moon. She still touched him like he was something precious. 15 years, she murmured against his mouth as he pressed her against their bedroom door, hands relearning familiar territory. "Best 15 years of my life," he responded, lifting her with the same urgency he'd had on their wedding night. They made love like they had something to prove. That truth was sexier than secrets. That choice was more binding than obligation. That love built on honesty could survive anything. 20 years later, Emma stood at her own wedding. reading both letters to explain why she'd chosen a partner who challenged rather than comforted her. A man who'd called her out when she was wrong, who'd pushed her to be better, who'd loved her enough to risk losing her to truth. What would you want your children to know about real love? About choosing truth over comfort? Share the lesson below. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about love that transforms rather than rescues. Comment below. Would you have sent that letter if you were Lila? Would you have chosen love over empire if you were Lucas? And remember, the most powerful love stories aren't about perfect people, but about imperfect people who choose to perfect their truth together. See you in the next story. This story reminds us that real love isn't about finding someone who never hurts you. It's about finding someone whose truth is worth the pain. If you've ever had to choose between comfort and conscience, between success and significance, you understand Lucas and Danielle's journey. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that love built on truth, even painful truth, stands stronger than love built on lies. What would you have done? Comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge what we think we know about love, sacrifice, and the courage it takes to choose both.